Good evening and welcome to the docket presented by Defense Diaries. I'm your host, Bob Mata. And tonight I'm really excited. We're slipping off like coverage of cases. And I feel really fortunate to have tonight's guest. Little background about when I got into the podcast game. The first thing, because we of course, like many podcasts, started up during the pandemic, and kind of the first event that was available for us to kind of dip our toes in and try to meet some people in the industry was the True Crime Podcast Festival, which was being hosted in Kansas City. And I want to say that was 2020, but don't quote it. Like, I think it was 2020. It could have been 2021. It's fuzzy. It's all a blur. But at any rate, we got there and we were neophytes. I think we had maybe like 7 episodes in the can and had just really started the pod. And at that particular podcast festival, we met just some of the most amazing people who are now and continue to be like our closest friends in the industry. And Aaron Habel and Justin, his partner on Gen Y, were 2 of those guys. These are like the type of people that when you're coming in, there can be folks that will give you the cold shoulder, won't give you the time of the day, especially when you're talking about somebody like Aaron and Justin, because they are literally the godfathers of true crime podcasting. I always call them that because it's true. They literally, I think there may have been one other true crime type podcast that existed when these 2 guys sat down and decided to do a true crime podcast. So when they were so gracious with us and just kind and thoughtful, and like I never felt weird about asking them questions because I didn't know anything about the industry. I didn't know anybody in the industry. So it speaks volumes as to his character. And we were really lucky because everybody we met at that first podcast festival, like I said, are dear, dear friends of mine. So if you guys aren't familiar with Aaron Habel, he is the host of just probably my favorite podcast of all time. After I discovered podcasts with Serial, the first one that I ran into was Gen Y. And I started listening and I love it. um, the dynamic and the chemistry between Justin and Aaron is phenomenal. You can tell that these guys have been buddies forever. And what I love about them is that they're like no bullshit. They're just straight shooters. And I'm big on that. That is just something that I'm always looking for in a pod. And they're just really a couple of bright guys. So like those things all bear themselves out in the pod. Most recently, Aaron has brought out another great podcast. It's a side project. Justin's not involved. He's got Jack Luna as his co-host on that. Jack Luna, if you are not aware of him, great pod voice, another super smart guy. And he has a podcast called Dark Topic, which is a great pod. And these guys got together, and I'll have him tell you a little bit more about Marooned, but it's a great one. It's like the concept of it is great. And it was a niche in true crime that nobody was doing. So that's what makes it ingenious. So without further ado, let's bring the man on and see what's going on. How you doing tonight, Aaron?
I'm doing great. How are you, Bob?
I'm awesome. I'm awesome, man. Thank you so much for joining. Really excited to have you, man. Um, so what's been going on with you? What's good?
Staying busy. Just released a new Marooned episode. I don't know if all of you are old enough to remember The Girl in the Well, but back in Midland, Texas, back in 1987, a little 18-month-old girl fell down into a well that was not very big. It was surprising that she even made it in there, but a town that was down on its luck and had suffered through the oil bust. You know how it was with the oil boom. Everybody thought, oh, we're rich forever. And then, it went bust. And it really, what I love about the story is this town was energized. They were on a mission to save this girl, you know, and the only thing at the time that could cover this story around the clock was CNN. there were no other cable news stations at the time. So
That's so funny to think
it's an
about.
amazing story.
Yeah, that's wild because like you forget about that. Like there was no real 24-hour news cycle like CNN when they kind of started that game. That was like that was it. There was because for me as an old bastard, it was the 10 o'clock news, and then you waited and you'd get, and like we actually read newspapers back then, and you'd get the evening edition, which would like if anything happened during the course of the day, they'd try to run to press and they print out. Yeah, that's crazy. And I was a junior in high school when that went down. And I definitely remember that story. So like the concept behind Marooned, how did you guys kind of land on that?
Well, actually, it was a concept that Jack Luna had prior to meeting me, even. And it just never got off the ground. And then he and I started working on a project that didn't see the light of day. We saw it. We started writing stories that were short, but they were horror stories, and they were pretty interesting. But I don't know. I think after I had written 2 stories and he'd written 4, he just called me one day and he goes, "I don't want you to feel bad, but if we only work together writing stories, it might take us like 2 years to get this stuff out." So, and I was like, okay, so let's do something else. And he's like, well, I've had this idea for a while. If you don't have an idea, and I said, no, let's just hear it. Tell me your idea. That would be great. So it was Marooned. He had the name. He had a couple of episodes in mind already, and I guess that's kind of why in the first episode is really all him. He wrote that whole thing. And then I think I've written most of the stuff research wise since then. And he always takes it and scripts it up. He's so good with words. It's funny to say, but he's the only one like him. I can tell you that. Yeah. From the first time I heard him, you can tell by his voice that he's not only a good narrator, but that he's a deep thinker.
Right.
And one of the best things I've ever heard him say was that he loves to listen. And that really struck me.
Yeah, and it's funny because I'm always telling people that listening is a skill. It really is. Like when I got into practicing law, and I knew kind of going into law school that I wanted to be a trial lawyer, because it's what my dad did, and it's like everybody that that's a friend of yours that can argue, that they always tell you, oh, my parents say I should be a lawyer because I can argue. And I don't know that it necessarily translates into being a good lawyer, but I could certainly argue. And what I loved most about trial work was the concept that, unlike almost any other conversation I have in daily life, you have 12 people that are beholden to you, that they are not waiting to speak because, like in most conversations that you have, the person that you're speaking with is typically waiting to say something. And that means that they're developing their thoughts in terms of what they're going to say, which then means they're only half listening to what you're saying. So, like, that was my absolute favorite thing about practicing law and trying cases with it. I knew that these 12 people weren't waiting to say something. They weren't thinking of anything else because they couldn't speak. So, yeah, that's a great point, man. Listening is absolutely, and it's a dying art, really.
Let me ask you a question, though. I mean, as an attorney, there must have been times, at least in trials you've paid attention to or ones you were a part of, but where the other side says something and it gives you something else to move forward with that maybe you hadn't planned on originally. Like they give you something.
100%. And usually that happens like typically during a direct examination. Like if I'm in trial, they have a witness on the stand, and the reality is that for defense attorneys, it's rare for us to be able to go out and interview state witnesses, because when we get the discovery, it's not a surprise who they're going to call. If they've got eyewitnesses or they've got people that are witnesses to some aspect of the crime or are material in some way, we know obviously they're going to get called. So typically we'll try to send our PI out and have them try to speak with them. Or if it's a really important witness, we always will bring our PI as what we call the prover, because obviously we have to have somebody there in the event that they change their statement later to get on the stand and testify at trial, because we can't get on there. So we bring like a PI, and we have that prover there. But the reality is that a vast majority of the time that they won't speak with us. It's very difficult. So to your point, like, we're basically going straight off the police report, and we're limited to that with respect to what those witnesses are going to say. So we're surprised a lot in terms of things that the state will ask a witness on the stand. And, we're having to think on our feet. Sometimes it blows our hair back and we're like, oh my God, like we weren't anticipating that. And you're trying to regroup on the fly. And, yeah, it's one of the challenging things about trial. That's like why, if I've got my client sitting next to me, and like we typically have it where it's either me, Allie, client, or Allie, me, client. And it seems like if Allie's going to be handling the witness, she'll sit at the end portion of the table and I'll sit in the middle. So I'm the guy who the client is talking in my ear during the entire direct examination, saying, "Oh, that's bullshit. Oh, that's not true. Oh, that guy's," and I'm sliding the pad of paper over to the dude, and I'm like, "Hey, man, you gotta write it down. Write down notes. I have to listen to this direct for exactly what you're saying, because we get surprised all the time. It, like, kind of less so than when we're making like an argument, like in motion work. Like there, we can anticipate what they're going to argue because most of it's argued in the paper. But yeah, that's definitely a part of really having to kind of think on your feet in trial work. That's why, and I don't know if you're watching the Daybell thing at all. But this guy is going on what they're anticipating is going to be an 8 to 10 week trial, and defense counsel's trying the case by himself. And I keep trying to tell people, I'm like, trying a case of that size with that much evidence with no one else, like not having like co-counsel at the table with you, is a daunting task, man. So it's like you need that partner. Like that's why you'll always see the state always has two, sometimes three attorneys there, so we could catch those type of things that you're talking about.
Yeah, even Alec Murdoch, I mean, he had a team.
He had a team.
And, you know, power to them. They had a tough case because, I mean, it's one of those cases where, I mean, just today, Justin and I recorded an episode, and the theme of the episode was there are no perfect cases, but it's always degrees. There are cases where there is a lot of evidence. And so, maybe more of what they're really fighting for is they're fighting for what kind of sentence he'll get. But, that Alec Murdoch might be an extreme, but I do wonder, for everyone listening too, like when you watch trials, there are some trials where just innately, sometimes we just feel we know what happened. We just know, right?
Yep.
We might be wrong, but we know. And yet there are cases out there where even the prosecution knew going in that the people they had were probably not the people, if not definitely not the people. And so, have you heard of the Palladium murders?
No, tell me about it.
So back, it was a Thanksgiving. They had some Latin night at the Palladium in Manhattan, and sometime around 1 in the morning, someone opened up fire, shooting a gun at the Palladium, and a couple of bouncers were shot. And you fast forward, and they had picked up a couple of guys, David Lemus and Olmedo Hidalgo, for this crime. And I think they were in their 20s or something. Well, anyway, they ended up getting convicted. But it turns out that the prosecution knew in advance of the trial back when that these guys were probably not the guys. And then as time went on, and you've probably seen this with other cases where even prosecutors, law enforcement, people will start piling up on one side saying, okay, we know it's not them now. And in this case, they knew because there was a guy who was a gang member who ended up confessing
Wow.
and saying that was me. And then his buddy also said, yeah, I was there. I was with him. We did it.
Wow.
And they confessed. And so, and then the DA went ahead and said, we're going to go and try and get them back in court and put them away again after their release, because I think they were released in around 2005. So you're talking 14, 15 years of their life just gone.
Wow.
And the DA at the time, he actually went to his office and was saying, look, nobody thinks these guys did it. I mean, all the evidence we have says that it was these other guys, and he was told to move ahead. And if he wouldn't, they would get another attorney.
Man.
So his last name was Bibb. He decided, you know what? I've got to stay on this case because I don't want it to get away from me. I don't want these guys to go back to prison. And I've never heard of this before, but he started working secretly with the defense attorneys and
Wow.
feeding them angles to say, here's what I think you should focus on, or ask these questions. And apparently, even during trial, like if they had a recess or something, and if they kind of missed a question that was important for a witness or something, he would meet up with them and say, "What are you guys doing? You're throwing this case away." You know?
Whoa. Are you
So
serious?
he was
I have
instrumental.
never heard of that.
Yeah, no, it's a real
Wow.
thing. The New York Times has covered it. It's kind of big news online, I think, but I don't know if any podcasts have covered it.
Man, I
But
have to
I
say
think
I have
it's
a huge
ingenious.
amount of respect for that prosecutor, though.
Oh, I know. I'm like, I've never heard of this. So, they had asked him, like, why did you stay involved? And he said they would put someone in who would fight to put these guys back in prison. I don't want that.
Wow.
So, yeah. So I guess what I'm getting at is you have this idea out there from just say regular folks like myself, and I'm sure many others who say, well, if you're a prosecutor, it's up to you. You're the one that has to make the call. And you do that based on the information you get from law enforcement, from the detective work. And you say, I have enough, or no, this is a waste of the state's money. And sure enough, we have some prosecutors that are like that. And they'll say, I'm sorry, Kyron Horman's family, but we don't have enough to go after anybody on this right now. Sorry. And in other cases, they take someone to trial with no evidence, it seems, just a couple of eyewitnesses, and we know what that's worth. So, to you, what would you think about this? I mean, is this just a matter of people are all different, and it's just like with law enforcement or prosecutors or judges, you get all kinds? Because it seems weird to me that you would have a DA that would literally say, I don't care what you think. I don't care what our evidence says. We're still taking these. And because I think it seems like they just want the victory back.
Yeah. I- it's frustrating is what it is for me. I mean, like 20 years in the game, and look, a vast majority of the time, I think that they get it right. I really do. I mean, most criminals are not geniuses. Most crimes are not the horrific stuff that that we're covering. I mean, there's massive amounts of the system that are filled up with domestic violence, drug cases, battery, just the small stuff. So when you get, a case where you've got a guy that is telling you, look, I didn't do this, but doesn't necessarily have like a rock solid alibi, but the evidence just doesn't in any way, shape, or form indicate that this is the person that committed the crime. Man, you would not believe how many of these conversations we try to have with prosecutors, and we're practicing in various counties, man, and it is a person by person thing, but it's also an office by office thing, because remember, every prosecutor in every county is an elected official. I mean, they are beholden to the electorate, whatever platform they ran on. If they're the tough on crime prosecutor, that's the platform that they're going to carry through their entire, the time that they're in office, and so it's incredibly frustrating. Like, Aaron, like, I can honestly say I have never had a prosecutor walk back not only a charge that clearly that my client didn't commit, but like walk back like an overcharge where they're overcharging my client. And I'm always like, because I'm always trying to do it from the defense attorney perspective. I'm trying to humanize my client, because for prosecutors who never deal with the defendants, it's like one of the things that I'm always talking about. It's like they never sit in a room with these people. So for them, they're merely, you know, names on a piece of paper, and their names that are in a police report, and there's no humanity to it. So it's like I'm always trying to focus on really trying to drive home the fact that this is a person. Like, say for instance, I've got like a young, like a 17-year-old kid, and who did something stupid, but it was out of the stupidity of youth. And we shouldn't ruin this kid's life by hanging a felony on him, which, make no bones about it, you get a felony, your life as you know it is forever changed. Like in terms of getting jobs, everything. It haunts you for the rest of your days. So I'm always, if I've got a kid who like got busted with like a bag of, like, back in the day, a bag of weed, and it had weight, and they're like, well, that's a felony amount of weed. I'm like, the kid's smoking weed. He's 17 years old. I'm like, can we have a conversation? Can we just try to look at the broader picture? This kid's a good kid. He's got a good family. He's got a future. Are we going to destroy his life right here and now? Or can we look at it in a broader perspective? And man, you'd be stunned. Like how often they're like, pound sand. We're going forward. So, but when you get those cases where you feel like, and like you said, like, I don't know. Sometimes I don't know. I never ask my clients if they did it or they didn't do it, because it doesn't affect my job.
You have
Like
a job to do.
I do. And like you said at the very beginning, if they have powerful evidence, my job shifts from trying to get them off to making sure that my client gets a fair trial, making sure that my client understands his rights, making sure that the cops did their jobs right and didn't violate the Constitution, and make sure the prosecutor's doing their job correctly. If I do all those things and they have the evidence and the case is tried well, you're going to get a conviction that sticks and it's the right result, But if you have a situation where that's not the case, it creates an entirely different conversation. And it's that conversation where, look, because sometimes I'll have a client who just won't take a plea. Like, I'm like, look, man, they got powerful evidence. This isn't like a silver tongue thing. This isn't like we're going in and I'm going to Svengali the jury and you're going to walk out of there, in the hopes that the state's going to screw up to the extent that the jury is going to get confused and acquit you is slim and none. So yeah, there's a lot of parts to the gig for sure. But, in terms of like when I shift into the plea mode, that's really where a bulk of lawyering is from the criminal defense side of it. Cause like I was saying, they really do get it right. Most of the time they typically have the right guy, because typically, they're caught red-handed, and so at that point you shift into the mode of, all right, let's try to make sure that the punishment fits the crime. Like, we don't have to drop the hammer on every single person, especially if it's like a victimless crime. I mean, because like that is a whole world of criminal law where there's no real victim, or like a possession of drugs is like, I don't think anybody should be spending time in prison for possessing drugs. I don't care what kind of drug it is. And I'm not saying they should legalize it, and I'm not saying they shouldn't be punished. If you violate the law, figure out an alternative sentence, or better yet, put them in a program, try to help them instead of sticking them in a prison, which is only going to make things worse when they get out on the other end. So,
Well, that's the age old thing. It's the age old question of, do we reform people or do we just punish them? And I hate to say it, but we're in the United States of America and it seems like we favor punishment. It doesn't mean that that's everyone everywhere. I have seen reforms in certain prisons across the United States, but I do worry that when it comes to, defense attorneys versus prosecutors, that there are, in my opinion, maybe more prosecutors who are not being as honest about things because their jobs are on the line and they have to get so many cases closed or, get so many convictions and then they run on that. But, I guess I might be crazy, but I feel like a prosecutor could run for reelection and say, I know I only had this many convictions, but there were this many people that we helped to free who didn't actually do the crime. So we're
right.
actually paying attention here and we're doing things as fair as we can for you, the public.
Right, 100%, and it's
Would
like,
would anyone say that?
I've never run into them. The closest that I've come is like in our kind of primary county that we practice in. Um, Like when the now current state's attorney was running for election, she was running on a campaign of, I am changing the narrative. I'm changing the mission of this office. We're not the crime and punishment office anymore. If we become aware that there's mental health issues or that there's addiction issues, instead of funneling them into the Department of Corrections, we're going to give them the opportunity to go through programs and get treatment. Like, dude, my head almost exploded. Like, I was like, oh my God. Like I never thought that there would be a day where I was going to say, I will actively campaign for you. Like what you were saying to me is like music to my ears, because like those two aspects, which if you really kind of break down like every crime, you'd be probably not surprised that a vast majority of them are either stemming from addiction issues, alcohol, drugs, and or mental illness of some type, man. I mean, like well-adjusted people are typically not going out and committing violent crimes. So for that particular state's attorney, who I'm happy to say won and followed through with everything that she promised, like to me, she's the pinnacle. She's the poster child for what every prosecutor's office should look at and try to be, because it's exactly like you said. Because I think if you're looking at it like that, from that perspective, what you're talking about goes hand in hand with it, because it becomes a more ethical office where it's not driven just by convictions, like that like the number, this is the number we have to hit. Like it reminds me of cops, like how they have to hit their quota on speeding tickets every month. Oh, don't go don't go on the expressway the last 5 days of the month because they're going to nail you. I mean, that they have to, it's a source of income. I mean, there's internal conflicts built into the criminal justice system that and money's a part of it, and power's a part of it, and politics are a part of it. So yeah, I mean, obviously I'm with you on everything you're saying, man.
Yeah. No,
So
it's just one of those things that we have it in our heads that things are supposed to operate a certain way, and sometimes we find that that's not the way it operates. I mean, I believe I talked to you about the Danny Brown case before, and Danny Brown was a guy who'd been convicted of murdering his girlfriend, and her 4-year-old son gave powerful witness testimony about how it was Danny. And yet, years later, they get a hit on the DNA somehow, and it matches someone else who, I mean, at the time, I know when I was looking at it, I was thinking, this looks like a larger, scarier version of Danny, but a different man. And so when they talked to the prosecutor, they said, well, this is pretty powerful evidence. Shouldn't we do something about this? And she said, no, all it tells me is that he didn't work alone.
wow. See, that's the thing. That like, and that is typically the number one response from them when they're just absolutely not going to back down on charges, especially if they've gotten the conviction. And like, I mean, well, let me ask you, do you think that is part and parcel because of the fear of the civil rights lawsuit that is sure to come down the pike when somebody spent 20 years in prison, or is it an ego thing? Like, what do you think? Like, I don't know where I land on it.
Well, the prosecutor, she doesn't have to pay this out, right? It's not coming out of her pocket. I think it is driven by the fact that if they take a hit that way, it reflects poorly on the office. Where, I mean, just again, Joe Schmo here, Aaron. I'm thinking if they would come out and admit they were wrong, or that they now have new evidence that changes it for them. Wow, that would be what you're talking about, breath of fresh air.
Oh,
That's what I
man.
want to hear. But when these prosecutors double down and say, well, we have the right guy, it just happened to be two guys there, when the son didn't ever say there were two, um, it makes me lose all respect for the prosecutor. And then if they do anything else down the road, I'm just like, wow, suspect.
Yeah, well, like, so take for instance, like when Carolyn Mosby, who was the Baltimore state's attorney that, essentially freed Adnan Syed. And and like when that, like, I didn't know about Mosby's like issues with the federal courts in terms of her like skimming money from COVID relief funds. Like I didn't know about any of that when that was going down. And when they moved to vacate the conviction, which I had never seen. I had never, like, it is not available in Illinois. There does not exist a statute in Illinois. And this will blow your mind because it goes exactly to what you're saying. There does not exist a vehicle in which a prosecutor can turn around and motion the court and say, we screwed up. We are asking, we don't trust this verdict any longer. New evidence has come about, has surfaced, and we do not believe that this is a good verdict, a good and just verdict. It doesn't exist. And it didn't exist in Maryland either. And what created that statute was that gun trace task force, that rogue outfit of cops that was just a nightmare, that were literally robbing drug dealers, busting people that were innocent. Like there were no boundaries for these guys, and they had all the power of the badge and the gun behind them. And like, it was so bad that the legislature said, you know what? So many people went down on bad busts with this thing that we literally have to create a statute so that the prosecutor's office can now come in on a motion and say, we have to vacate this conviction because it's bad. Like, think about that concept. Like, the fact that didn't exist in the law is mind blowing,
Yeah, you would think, but people will people, right? I mean,
People will
this is
people.
the thing. When you make someone the highest level in power, then you can't really question them because they protect themselves. They don't have any, anything that can be used against them. They're just doing their jobs. And so then we're stuck with corruption. We're stuck with bad calls. We're stuck with terrible trials. And I keep advocating for this, but there needs to be a way that no one is a king or a queen. That's it. It's just simply, if you mess up, fess up. And if you don't want to, maybe you need to be seated in court. Maybe
Right.
it should be you on the line, because
Right.
as long as we have people that are above the law, we're going to have people committing crimes and getting away with it. And I don't know who's comfortable with that other than the people trying to get away with it.
Yeah, well, I'm certainly not comfortable with it. And it's like, so this old cop I'm working with on this Gacy thing that we're trying to find additional victims. So he was a whistleblower cop. He was a former Chicago detective, now long retired, and he actually lives in Europe. So he was the whistleblower in a case against a cop named Reynaldo Guevara. Ronaldo Guevara in the 90s was using all of his confidential informants, which typically you get these guys when you pick them up on a charge, whether it be a drug thing, whatever the case may be, and you get them to flip and you say, look, man, you're looking at a 2, 3, 4 year bid, or in the alternative, you can work for me and you're going to be my eyes and ears on the street. And when you hear shit, you come back to me and you let me know. So this guy was using all his whole horde of confidential informants to close cold murder cases in the city of Chicago, which I'm sure we are right amongst the leaders in the murder capital of the world. We have more shootings than anywhere, or at least as much as some. And this guy ends up using all of his CIs, and he puts 51 innocent men, Hispanic men from his own community, in prison on murder charges, all of which served 10, 20 years before Bill Dorsch is sitting at his desk. And like, Guevara's deep into doing this. He's got guys that are on his, like on his crew that are helping him do it, other cops. Everybody's hush hush on it. So Dorsch is sitting at his desk one day, and they bust open one of the mugshot books. He's got this kid with them, and he opens the book. He's like, all right. He's like, point out the guy that you saw. Guevara is saying this. Dorsch is just sitting at his desk. Kid's like, I think it's that one. Guevara turns the book towards him, takes his hand. He's like, you mean this one? And points his hand puts his finger on a different picture entirely. Dorsch doesn't say anything. He's like, holy shit. He's like, did I just see what I think I saw? And so Dorsch in that thin blue line thing is real, like in terms of like being a rat where you're ratting on your fellow officers, they will run you out of town. They will do all kinds of shit. So, but that one move where he went to his superior officer and said, look, like I'm telling you, you need to be looking into Guevara's cases. I just saw him do this. And so ultimately, 31 of them have been fully exonerated. Chicago's paying out $20 million a pop on these cases, and they chased Bill Dorsch out of the country. Two of his sons are cops, both just like all of them. Both these guys have commendations up the butt, and neither one of them have ever gotten a promotion. So they put a brick on their careers. Dude, it's like what you're saying, man. The power, that kingmaker thing that exists is just like, how do we switch that though? Like, what is the
There's no
answer?
place for it. I think we just need to fall out of love with making gods kings and queens, because when it comes down to it, we need a fair system for everyone. We're not going to get that as long as there's corruption, as long as there's a slippery slope somewhere. And look, I don't always get it right, but I feel like if we make things as fair as possible, then we can all rest easy at night. I think about, so I also do that show Framed, which I'm currently trying to work on a season 3. But our first season was all about the death of Brian Carrick, and they had never found his body. I mean, he went to work to go collect his paycheck. He never walked out. They never saw him again. And I don't know if you've heard of this case, but
Well, I listened to that season of Framed. So
yeah, they pegged the crime on Mario Cacharo, and it's because it was his family that owned the store, the grocery store, and they said it had to be him because he had this means of transporting a body, because they figured the body was taken away somehow. And yet all of the evidence at the scene was connected to a person who was actually really good friends with the victim. You're talking about fingerprints, DNA, blood. None of it matched Mario. Mario, in fact, had an alibi, you know, but they didn't care. And so if you flash forward, the prosecutor in that case reached out to me because he listened to some of the season, or maybe all of it. I don't know. He didn't tell me, but he said, you and I need to talk.
wow.
And I said, are you going to admit that you prosecuted someone despite all the forensic evidence? Because that's what we're dealing with here. But no, he didn't want to do that. He wanted to tell me why I was wrong. And I just said, I'm not going to take any time then, because as it stands, Mario's out of prison. He's out of prison because they got the wrong guy.
Good on you, man.
And then the guy who left all the evidence behind, well, he's dead. So where do you go with the case? I don't know. I mean, part of doing the season with, I did it with Jake. Jake actually came up with a brilliant solution as to what happened in that case. So if you listen to season 1, we actually tell you where we think Brian Carrick is. And we have reason to believe that he's still in that spot, but no one wants to help us. We contacted attorneys, we contacted the FBI. No one will listen to us because there are politics involved. Well, we're still dealing with this, or there's this going on, or I don't have time, or that case is kind of closed. Really? So that's what we're dealing with.
And this is the pod, y'all. If you guys have not listened to Frame, there's 2 seasons. Yeah, what are you waiting on, dude? Like where's the next season, bro? Like what is going on? I mean,
I've gotten, not 1,000 messages, but I've gotten dozens and dozens of messages, people asking me, and I've got a case that's one of my pet cases that I'm wanting covered. But let's just say the guy I work with, and he's brilliant. Jake is brilliant. I give him the credit because his ability to put everything together the way he does. I'm like, you have an attorney mind, because I know attorneys have to juggle a lot of things in their head. They have to be light on their feet just in case something happens.
yep.
Something might land in your lap, something might get taken away. His ability to put this story together, blows me away, because I remember when I first sat down to go through the scripts, and all I did was correct spelling I'm really good at spelling, but seriously, I was like, I couldn't really correct anything. I mean, his writing is so good. So,
Yeah, that's
Framed is kind of a
clutch.
unique thing in the podcast space, but it's kind of a love it or hate it thing, I guess, because I've had a lot of people tell me, well, I was liking it up until I heard voice actors, but it's just a way to break it up and also to inform you. It's kind of interesting to have certain things play out with different characters, different
Yeah.
voices. And I certainly don't want to voice all the characters. So,
Yeah,
we had
then you're
people help
me.
us in that regard.
Like I get the same thing like with Garcia, and I'm relatively good at voices. I can do a lot of voices, but Darren, my producer, I'm like in the Garcia season, I'm like, oh well, there's a Russian guy. Can I do my Russian accent? He's like, if you want to get canceled, you can. I'm like, oh man. So I had to do some kind of weird amalgam. So I'll read comments like people are like, oh, it's the worst Russian accent I've ever heard. And I'm like, it's an amalgam. But yeah, like I get the same feedback. Like Allison and I, especially with, we're kind of doing reenactments and I'll play like, and I should just get other voice actors to do it, but I kind of enjoy it. Like I'll do three of the four characters if we're doing like a motion that we're going through the transcript and we're actually acting it out. But I'll get the same comments. I'll get comments from people like, yeah, we like your scripted stuff, but when you're voice acting it out, because I feel the same way. I like to kind of switch it up a little bit. It doesn't always have to be scripted with me just telling the story. I like to add that element of kind of uniqueness to it where you're changing the vibe completely and trying to put somebody in the moment. But yeah, some people just don't dig it, man. And
Yeah.
it's like I quit reading reviews a long time ago. It's like between like Josh Hallmark is like one of the first things he told me when I got in the game. He's like, man, he's like the sooner you can quit, like stop yourself from reading reviews, the better off you'll be. And like that was gospel. That was gospel. So,
Yeah.
because like in your season 2 of Framed was phenomenal, man.
Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah.
It's so good. It was like when I first met you, like that had I think it had been out for like a year, but like you started to tell me about the story because I was not familiar with it. And like I think on the plane ride home, because I think you mentioned it to me. Um, I can't remember if I was in Vegas or if I was like wherever it was, and you started telling me about it. I'm like, all right, that's my next shit. Cause I'm super picky. Like I'm just very picky with pods. Like if I don't like somebody's voice, I can't do it. If I don't like the style, I can't do it. So if you guys have not listened to Framed, make it your next binge. 2 seasons are both unbelievable. I mean, with Gen Y, I mean, if you have never delved, and I'm talking to you, all the subs out there and all the people watching us, if you've never dipped your toes into Gen Y, just know that you have 12 years worth of content. And I'm talking about amazing content. Yeah, dude, like I love you guys. You guys, I'm a huge fan. So I was gonna ask you, so what have you followed? Are you following any of the like the cases that are going on right now, kind of the bigger ones? Like we've got Karen Reed, which is currently they're picking a jury as we speak. Are you familiar with that case at all?
Yeah, no, that's something that you and I talked about the other day, because I told you that one kind of got me because, when we covered it, I was trying to make sense of it, and I was very much leaning toward it seemed like it could have just been an accident or something like that. Um, but, one thing that I didn't really take into account, because it's not something that happens very often, if ever, is what if this evidence was planted? Because it would have to be planted for it to be someone else, my opinion, you know? So that's one thing when I covered it, I didn't really take that into account, but I had a meeting with Justin afterward, and it's always fun to talk with him because Justin's a little more rigid when it comes to stuff. If he makes up his mind about something, I'm just a questioning person. And even if I don't sound like it, that is my forte. always questioning things, even things that I do or say. So it was after we did that episode and we had some people writing going, well, you don't know the officers involved in this case. I've been around them. We've had people from the Boston area writing to us. And so it's been kind of enlightening. So I don't know where I stand on it. I just wish that I'd played it a little more coy, because when I think about it, people do plant evidence. People do pull shenanigans. So did that happen? I don't know. But if it turns out they did, I hope they find out, because all I want is justice. And
Oh, that's
whatever that
it.
is, that's what it's going to be, I hope. So it
Exactly.
doesn't matter what I think.
But you're right. I mean, like whatever that is, it's like obviously in a homicide case, like you'll never get true justice because we have not figured out a way to bring people's family members back and loved ones back. I mean, that's like, so the best that we've come up with is try to punish the person who's committed the crime. Does that make people whole? Not by a long shot. Does it give them some satisfaction? Maybe. I'm sure it does a little bit. But in terms of trying to get to the truth in a case, the sad reality is that truth and justice are two things that don't necessarily coincide with one another very well. And it's elusive, man. And like that case in particular, I think is fascinating because there's two cases out there. There's Abby and Libby's case, the Delphi case, and there's the Karen Reed case. And what's unusual about those cases, and I've been kind of like putting this thought out there for the past few lives that I've been doing. And what's so unusual about them is the fact that we are so accustomed to, and I can't remember if we chatted about this on the phone, but we're so accustomed, like for the entirety of that we've been following true crime and consuming that content and learning about cases, that we hear the state's theory of the case first, and that is typically what is put out to the public, and that is what we sit there and ruminate and think about, and that's what's fed to us by the media. And it's just their theory. It's untested evidence. It's evidence that has not been vetted at trial yet. It's what the police collected, and between the cops and the prosecutor, they have come up with a theory on what happened. And the reality is the cops weren't there when it happened. The prosecutor wasn't there when it happened. I wasn't there when it would happen. So none of us were there. So we're all coming out with theories. But what happened in these two cases, which is like, and I'm trying to think, and if you could think of a case where it has happened, where you have the defense laying out their entire theory of the case early on, to where you've got both full theories out, which in my estimation, it evens the scales of justice, where it's not just the prosecutor's theory that's out there, which is of course prejudicial. Like if Aaron, if you're a brilliant storyteller, if you were to come on and say, hey man, did you hear about this thing? This is how it went down. And you went through your story. And I said, well, I heard a different story. And you said, well, we're not going to listen to your story right now. We're just going to hear my story. And you're super compelling. People are going to fall into the side of, well, shit, Aaron knows. That's Aaron's theory. Aaron's theory, like it's the only thing that we know. And he's right about shit all the time. He's got credence. He's got credibility. So that, of course, is going to create, it destroys the presumption of innocence going into a trial. It just does, unequivocally. So, but what in both of those cases, what it's done is it's created this like just incredibly toxic divide in like no other case. Like, and it's specifically those two cases. If you're to go like anywhere on social media and look, like delve into the two communities that are deeply invested in Reed or the Delphi case, they are at war. And it's because we have these two theories out there where typically it's just the state's theory. Now, people may disagree with it, but it's a very different story when you know that the defense has put out, this is what our case in chief is going to be. And the defense doesn't have to prove a damn thing, but they're saying, this is a whodunit. I know what the state's telling you, but we're saying it was somebody else, and this is who we think it is, and it's based on the state's own evidence that they provided to us. So it's a super unusual circumstance, and and I'm here for it, but I hate what it's doing to the true crime community. you know?
Yeah, well, so my thought is I'm actually glad it's happening in a way because, people do have their opinions. There are people who are very much in this on the side of, well, they need protecting. I think the Karen Reed case is a lot bigger in terms of the divide. I don't really feel as strong a divide with Delphi. I know it's there, but I really think it's a good thing it's happening because before it was the defense needs to hold stuff back, they need to do trial. But I think it does matter having the public seeing and hearing things before. Of course, like the prosecution's case, it's not really vetted either, but hey, two can play that game, and that's maybe what should happen. And I often say that all have our smartphones, we have constant access to information, and we have the ability to communicate all the time without thinking. So the way I look at it is, we're going to have to grow and learn how to adapt to our smartphones, and we're going to have to grow and adapt to this situation too, because that's just the way it's going to be going forward in certain cases. Because, when you look at the Karen Reed case, if they're right and, John was killed in the house and then put back outside, and there's some honest people somewhere along that line through this process, then that should be borne out. We should know about it. We should find out about it. And then some people are going to be in some big trouble, I would hope. But, I just want them to get it right. And I don't want anyone to say, well, it can't be this, can't be that. Everything should be vetted and tested, because that's the beauty of the courtroom. It's mano a mano, or however you want to look at it. It's two people going up against each other, two sides, and they have to lob their best shots, their best evidence, and be persuasive to a jury. And that's what I want.
Me too, man. I mean, that's it. Like that's like I'm on my soapbox constantly. Like I mean that's really like the entire like my mission statement behind my podcast, for like starting with Gacy, like with my, I started doing this thing like it's your favorite time, it's my favorite time, where I was explaining to people different legal processes. What is a motion to suppress? Like giving the consumers that love what we do so much, like more information, arming them with information that will help them understand what they're looking and hearing. And I just think that it helps. And like the thing that I've taken the most joy of in terms of like pivoting my career kind of late in life is like when I see people like they will message like at wherever on the socials, like, oh man, I really hated defense attorneys until I listened to your podcast, and you've opened my eyes that to exactly what you're saying, because that's what I preach. I'm like, I don't know who did what prior to a trial happening. None of us do. It's like I understand that human nature, like we're all going to form an initial opinion. And all I ask is don't make that your final opinion. You can't make that your final opinion until we've heard the evidence. And shit, Aaron, there's times where I hear all of the evidence and I still don't know. You know what I mean? Like, no matter, notwithstanding the verdict, and I still don't know in my heart of hearts. I'm like, man, that guy definitely did it. And it's like, and I don't know that we'll ever get that. We're humans. Mistakes are made. We come from places of emotion, which has no place in courts of law. And we're really supposed to be robotic in that sense. We're really supposed to be cold and calculating and just evaluating the evidence, and not allowing the fact that if God forbid a child is killed, you can't allow that emotion and that desire to have somebody pay for doing that rule over logic and facts and evidence. And it's such a like an uphill battle, man. And it's like it sometimes I get disheartened, but then I see people where I've been able to get, and I'm not asking them to do anything other than just hear it out. Let the process work. Let the process go through the process. Hear all the evidence, and then as an informed person, then you make a decision. And it's hard to get people there, man. It just is.
Yeah, I think there's something innate to some of us where we have to be divided. We have to be against each other. They're on team blue, we're on team red. And it kind of bothers me because as long as we're going to take a side and not appreciate the other side, now we're always going to be at war with each other in some way, and we're not coming together, and we can't make changes that need to be made because we don't have enough folks. Even if privately we're all saying the same thing. I think often about where I'm out and about. Let's say if I'm at a grocery store or something, and maybe I've got a Red Wing jersey on or something. I'm a big Detroit Red Wings fan, and I'll have someone who's wearing like a Chicago Blackhawks cap go by and go, "F the Red Wings." And I was looking at him and go, "Wait a minute, you know, we both love hockey. I mean, I love
Right.
when the Blackhawks and the Red Wings play. It's
Right.
phenomenal." And then most of the time, these people will stop and go, "Oh, really? Like, wow. I usually someone just tells me to F off." And I'm like, "No, I rarely run into hockey fans. So I love talking hockey with people. And it cracks me up. So that's just
Especially like
I
Original
thought it brings
Six,
people
man.
together. That's me.
Yeah, me too, man. And it's like kind of like a Chicago example of that is like there's an expectation of growing up in this town that you have to pick either the Cubs or the White Sox, depending on whether you live on the north side or the south side. And in my position is I love baseball the same way that you love hockey. And we don't win enough championships in this town for me to be picky. Do I have a preference in terms of which team I'm going to root for if like the world exploded and these two met in the World Series, which will never happen in my lifetime? Yeah, I'd root for the Sox, but that was just part and parcel because that's who I went to go see more games when I was young because the Cubs didn't have lights and we had to go to night games because my dad worked. So I just saw more Sox games. But I love both teams because I love the game. I love watching good baseball, and it's like when I lived in Philly and I had friends that were Eagles fans and they'd bring me to like an Eagles game and I'd rep, I'd wear my Bears jersey and they wouldn't be playing the Bears, but like the Eagles fans, man, are like this different breed of human being that are just so brutal. Like that would be, I'd be walking and I'd have like a group of 10 or 20 guys behind me, like chanting asshole. So I'm like trying to have the same conversation. I'm like, hey, man, I'm like, we're all football fans here. I'm like, I'm just here to enjoy the game, So yeah, you're right, man. I mean, and like, I don't know that that's ever going to change. I mean, I think that human nature is kind of, cast us in that die, and I don't know that it'll ever be any different.
Yeah,
Because
there
I
just
mean,
has to be a divide. But yeah, I would go see just about any hockey team. Like if I'm visiting some city. In fact, when I went out and did a meetup in San Jose, Justin and I were hanging out with Esther from Once Upon a Crime, and she said, "Hey, when you come out, if there's a game on, you know, I'll take you to a game." And I was excited to go. I don't San Jose Sharks, sure, I'll go see that.
yeah,
I don't care who they're playing. I just want to see hockey. I love hockey. In fact, my Wings are not in the playoffs through some weird shenanigans, but I'm going to be watching as much as I can watch of the playoffs. I'm super excited for it. But I just feel like as sports fans, should just be together instead of constantly fighting. And, like where I live in Kansas City, Missouri. And so everything out here is Chiefs, 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 and maybe Royals. Um, so, I walk around. I don't have any of that gear on, and I'm invisible, I guess. But yeah, I'll just wear my Red Wing stuff here and
yeah.
Tigard stuff, of course.
I agree, man. It's like as far as the sports thing goes, it's like, and I'm a big sports fan. Like I've always been a big sports fan, and I love the game. And for the record, there is nothing on the planet that is more exciting than hockey, the NHL playoffs. I mean, like talking about like just being on the edge of your seat for the entirety of a game. There's just no sport like it. And like when the Hawks had their renaissance with Tays and Kane, and like they literally rose from the ashes after being like a dead franchise in the city, like where they weren't even sending a beat reporter out to follow the games. It was like literally the box score. And then when they came back to relevance, it was so amazing, man. And it
You're
was
talking
like,
around what, 2010, right? They
yep,
started just
yep,
destroying the league.
yes, that
Yeah,
was
they
it.
were a
It's
beast out there.
yeah, exactly. Well, I'm hoping because we got Bedard in the draft, and I think he's going to be a hell of a player. So we're rebuilding still. Hopefully, we get a second wave of that. But like,
I had my dad telling me about him. He's like, "You should see his stats," and I'm like, "Well, I want to hear from the guy. And so I read an interview with him and then listened to one later. And he's super humble. Like I think
Yeah,
that guy might be he might be the most dangerous talent out there right now. He's very humble, saying I have to prove myself yet, and he looks amazing.
he
So
does.
I think he's going to be quite a special player.
I hope so. I hope so. We need it. Like we don't win enough here. It's like I'm an old man and I've seen
An old man.
I've
He's
seen well,
insane.
yeah,
How
I
old
can't
would you be,
bitch
Bob?
because we had Jordan. You know what I mean? Like I had the Jordan era,
That's
so
hard to
that like
follow up.
yeah, that's impossible to follow up because
Yeah.
that guy was just the greatest competitor of all time. So yeah,
That's a
man.
whole other conversation, Bob, because there's that argument of who's the best. Was it Jordan? Is it this guy? Is it, is it Mamba, whatever, LeBron? And I'll tell you what, I'm not an expert with basketball by any means, but there was something special about watching Jordan play that I don't feel with the other players. I know they're putting up, like Curry.
Right.
These guys are amazing, but there
Yep.
was something otherworldly about the way Jordan played that I've just not felt in because I watch some of the playoff games, whatever, once in a while. But like the way he played, there was just something about it I've never felt since.
Me either, and that goes for any sport. Like he was and I had the joy of being able to watch every guy, like every game that kid played from coming out of college at North Carolina to win. And he didn't win a championship for his first 7 seasons. Man, it was a battle. Getting past the Pistons was like just epic.
Yep,
And
the bad boys.
oh
I
man,
watched
I
all of
mean,
that.
oh man,
They put a team.
those series. But you know what separated him, like aside from just his incredible athletic ability, was I've never seen another human being in any sport that had the competitiveness that Michael Jordan had. That guy, every single game, he never mailed in a game ever. And I've never seen that. And like with basketball, it's a constant movement game like hockey, I mean, but they'll do these shifts in hockey because that's so exhausting. Like anybody who's never played hockey has no idea the skill level. Like I've had the debate, like who are the greatest athletes on the planet? And I'm always like, dude, those guys that are skating 50 to 60 miles an hour on a blade and then like stick handling and skating backwards and being able to maneuver like that.
Fighting.
And it's
Well, I'll
unbelievable.
give you a couple hockey players who are intensely competitive. The easy one is to say Dylan Larkin, the captain of the Red Wings. He's very competitive. I think the other guy that comes to mind is Nathan McKinnon with the Avalanche.
It's
I
great.
mean, I remember everyone's just been talking about Connor McDavid left and right. And when they met in the playoffs, what was it, like a couple years ago when the Avalanche won? Um, to me, he's the guy. I mean, you can say
I
who scores
agree.
more goals, this and that, but to me, he's kind of like he's a different player than some of the other big players I can think of. But really, it's just his competitive nature, and he's always working it out there. And so I feel like Nathan McKinnon would be, if I had to look at all the players right now, and if I was drafting a team, I would probably have to take him first, even though he's not my favorite player. But man, in terms of workload and everything, I just
Yeah.
think he's the whole package.
Yeah. And that's how Jordan was, man. It's like the greatest thing that happened in terms of the pandemic, in terms of things that came out was like that documentary dropped like in 2019, which was unbelievable. It's still my favorite documentary of all time. It was so well done. And it was like
I'll
they
have
were,
to give you one.
yeah, it was amazing, man. It was amazing. All right. So tell
Yeah, hey,
everybody where they could,
before you do that though,
yeah,
seriously, have you watched the documentary about the rivalry between the Red Wings and the Avalanche?
no, what's it on?
Watch that and get back to me.
Yeah, you think it's better than
Yeah,
The Last Dance? All right, where can I watch it? I'll definitely watch it. I love sports
ESPN
talk. All
Plus.
right.
I'm
Is
sure
it
you
is it
have that. You're a sports fan.
oh, 100%. Is it like one of their 60 for 60s? Like, is it
Yeah,
in that?
you can find it in there.
Yeah, that's all. I'll definitely check that out. I love that. I love that. All right, man. Tell everybody where they can find all your amazing work.
Wow. Well, there you put it on me. Well, mainly they can go to genypod.com, or they can just open up a podcast app and look for Generation Y. Or they can look up Marooned or Framed. I know we haven't talked much about what Marooned is actually about, but seriously, Marooned is kind of a weird thing. We talk about people that get catastrophically lost, and it just brings up lots of good conversations. And I feel like we hit our stride so many episodes in. So it's one of those things when you're beginning a podcast, you can't wait to get it out. But sometimes I think you should put some in the can first, and so that's what I'll do going forward because I am working on new stuff. But Generation
Dude.
Y has been the long running podcast I've been part of. And thankfully, last year I began to podcast full time. So that's why I'm working on even more content now.
Yeah, and like that whole like that's probably the biggest criticism of me, like personally right now. Like when is it like I'm 53 episodes into Garcia. Like I do not follow the rules. Like my Gacy season was 36 episodes. Like Josh does it with true crime bullshit, but he's smart enough to break it into seasons
Yeah.
like an idiot. Like I did not do that. And like I'm 53 in, and then I get sucked in. And then Alice and I start the docket, the side pod,
Mm-hmm.
and I get sucked into active cases that are like taking all my time up. So I'm literally neglecting Garcia. So the people that have invested huge amounts of time into Garcia are like furious with me because I'm not getting those episodes out in a timely fashion. So when you were talking about having some stuff in the can, like moving forward, there's no way that I'm not going to have episodes in the can. Like when I'm done with Garcia and I'm moving on to whatever I'm going to do in season 3, I've got to have stuff in the can because it's like you said, it's like, I mean, like when you're writing scripted stuff, like people kind of tend to forget or don't think about the fact that that's a creative process, man. It's like
Oh yeah.
we're not like I'm not using AI to make my scripts. You know what I'm saying? I sit there and I do the research and I write the damn thing and then do the recording. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
you're too old to lean on new tech like that.
exactly. I'm way too old for that. So here's Marooned, y'all. This is what it looks like. Um, it's a great pod, and if you guys haven't heard it, you're gonna love it. And Luna's just got a great voice. Like he's
Yeah, you
got
should
that.
click on who the hosts are so they can see his face.
Yeah, let me throw it down there.
It go up a little bit.
Let me
When it
see.
says who are the hosts, it'll be mid down the
Look
page.
at
There you
these
go.
two guys.
Check out Luna there. That's so I said, send me, a good looking headshot or whatever. And he sent that. He said that's my best headshot. That's what you're getting with Luna.
Yeah, well, I asked Aaron the same thing. I'm like, "Yo, man, send me your headshot," and he sends me this good looking picture. He's got his ink, he's got his sleeve going, nice black t-shirt, looking suave. Yeah, Jack, like
I wear
that's some
black
shit
all
that
the
I'd
time.
send. Like, so yeah, and we've been throwing the links in there for y'all. Make sure that you're subscribing and or following, depending on what your platform is, wherever you listen to your pods. All three of them are phenomenal. All three of them are available everywhere you get your pods. You got anything else going on, man? What else? Like true, like you're doing a couple of festivals, I know this year, right?
Yeah, I've got both crime cons. I'm not going to be able to make it to True Crime Podcast Festival because of a family obligation. Um, Most of my family is around the country. A lot of them are in Michigan. So I've got family coming in from Michigan to visit. And so I had to, make the call and say, I'm sorry. And of course, Lainey gave me a bunch of,
Oh
she
yeah.
gave me a hard time. She's like, well, I see how you are. You don't like us over here. And
Yeah.
we're not Crime Con, et cetera. But no, I love hanging out with everybody. And the one thing
So
I
great.
do appreciate about True Crime Podcast Festival is it's much more intimate in that you can find yourself just hanging out with people and chatting for a good hour and a half,
Easy.
and then realizing you're dehydrated. But it's a hell of a time. So if you can go, I would go to CrimeCon, True Crime Podcast Festival, and you'll run into Bob or myself, and either one of us can talk to you for 8 hours straight without,
Easy.
probably breathing.
Easy. So you're doing CrimeCon UK? That's
Yeah, every
amazing.
year I've done it. I've never done the Scotland one. I've never been there, but I go to London, and it's a great time. I love London.
We're doing it this year. That's going to be our
You'll be
first
there.
time. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm
Well, that's
super
great,
excited.
man, because every time I'm there, I'm like, "Hey, let's go out and do stuff." And everyone's like, "Oh, how are you driving?" And I'm like, "No, I'm walking." And they're like, "How far is it?" I'm like, 10 miles. And I'm like, "I'm not doing that. I'm staying at the hotel." And I'm like, "I'm leaving.
I'm your guy.
Walk for 15 miles. I don't care."
I am your guy. I'm 100% your guy. I'm all about that. And I've never been to the UK, so like I'm super excited
Do
about
you
the
like
whole damn
curry?
thing. Yeah. Yeah, it's like it's
We're
my,
going for
my
Indian at Dishoom.
yeah,
That was
dude,
it.
I'm all about it. I'm all about it. So yeah, I'm super pumped. So all right, dude, thank you so much, man. You're an amazing dude. You've got you do amazing work, and thank you. Thank you for creating true crime podcasts for all of us. I mean, honestly, that's like we could talk hours on that, but
We have talked for hours.
yeah,
Not tonight, but yeah.
dude, I mean, like, just like real quickly before we go, what possessed you guys to do it? How did it happen? How did you guys it didn't exist. Like, I don't know. It's
Yeah, it was a
almost like
weird
you
time back
invented it.
then. It was a weird time. You should have seen the podcast creation guides that were out there. They were like, buy a microphone. They didn't tell you what kind. They just said, buy a microphone. That was step one. No, it was Justin. He had been on a first degree murder trial. And he said it took about 5 days from start to finish, and the guy was convicted. And he just said, "Man, I've heard and seen so many things I didn't know were possible in one trial, and I want to tell people about it." And I said, "What are you asking me?" He goes, "I don't know. I just want to be able to tell people what I've heard." And I said, "Well, you want to start a podcast then?" And he said, Sure." That was literally it. And then I said, "Well, we're gonna have to take some time to put it together." He goes, "Why? We already have headset mics. I can start recording now." And I said, "Well, we need a name. You can't just put it out as Justin and Aaron. I guess we could have." And he was like, and it took him like 8 seconds, and he just said Generation Y. That was
Wow.
it.
Wow. And the
So he
rest?
didn't know what he wanted to do. And he always jokes that he's got ideas and I've got plans.
I mean, you need an idea guy. You know what I mean? It's like, and you need a planner. It's
Yeah. Well, I guess I'm the planner and he's the idea guy. So
Yeah, that's why I'm
it's worked
rudderless.
out.
Like I'm out at sea. I'm marooned at sea because like I don't have like the planner. I need somebody that's on my ass, being like, dude, focus, focus on one thing, finish one thing, and then move on to the next thing. Well, dude, you're amazing. I can't wait to see you. I'm sad you're not coming. Well, CrimeCon's coming first, so I'll get to see you at the end of May. So I'm
Yeah.
excited
May's
about
going to
that.
be a big month for me because I'm going to Germany. And then after I
Ooh,
get back, I've got a couple weeks and I turn around and go to CrimeCon.
what are you doing in Germany? Pleasure, fun?
My son and I, we've been learning German for quite a while, and I think the country looks amazing.
Does
So
look
we're
amazing.
just going to be going there. My brother works out there sometimes, so he's going to meet us out there, and we're just going to go see. Well, my favorite thing is to go see sites. I like seeing history, museums, zoos, whatever. But my son really wants to go to some hiking sites, and then we're also going to go maybe check out some smaller towns or drive to another big town. So we've got a car rented and we're just going to make the most of it, I guess.
Are you guys where in Germany are you gonna go?
We're going to be going primarily to Frankfurt, but it's kind of considered to be a smaller big city.
Yeah.
So I've been in discussions with a few people that have given me information. So between all of that, we have a car rented so we can go out, maybe to Schwarzwald, the Black Forest, whatever.
Yep.
But yeah, we're just looking forward to it. It should be a great time
It'll
seeing
be
another part of the world.
it's dude, I love nothing more than traveling, and I love doing the exact same stuff. Like I've been to Austria. Like if you guys can make that like a day trip to get over there, stunning, man. It's so beautiful. Like we went like we happened to be there during Christmas time in Vienna in in Austria was like the most breathtaking place that I've ever been at in my entire life. And it's like
Yeah.
you just know how Europe it's like you realize how young we are as a country when you step foot in Europe and you just the architecture and the history of it is just
Where the history comes from.
oh man, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. All right, man. I thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully you guys enjoyed hanging with Aaron. You can listen to him talk for hours. And I'll see you on the other side, brother.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing you soon.
All right. Peace. All right. So how amazing is Aaron? Just an unbelievable dude. I love him. If you guys have not checked out his pods, make sure again, of course, Gen Y, but don't sleep on Framed and Marooned. They're phenomenal pods. And I'm serious. I'm very picky. Like I'm a super picky podcast listener, and they're like all of them. You'll be sucked in immediately, and you'll thank me. You'll thank me for it later. So thank you all for hanging. Thank you to the mods, and thank you for everybody that was kind enough to gift memberships. Again, we have our always givers that gave love. Shiraz with 10, Jersey Jen with a gifted membership, Meg P, and of course Sandy. You guys are amazing. We love you. Thank you so much for spreading the love and spreading the memberships and helping us grow. It means everything to us. You guys are amazing, because without you, I'd just be an old man talking about old and new cases. Talk at you next time.